All right. Do you want to go ahead and get started, Susan?
Yep, sounds great. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I am Susan, obviously from my Zoom login there. If you joined us from the first version of our parent meeting, you know a little bit about me, but I'll just kind of summarize. I am a therapist that works at Valley Vista. I've worked here for about 15 and a half years, live in the community. I've been partnering with Center Grove this year in an effort to really meet some needs in the community, right? It's been a rough year for everyone, but definitely for our teenagers. And so these events are kind of designed to provide some education, some information. Also, we'll have some time for questions, and I welcome everybody. And we'll probably do this in two parts. The first part, we'll talk about depression, and we will pause then for some questions if you have any on that part of the presentation. Sarah is my cohort from Center Grove. She'll be kind of adding things in as she deems, she has things to share. And then after the first round of questions, we'll get into the information on discussion about bullying, and then also have some questions after that. So, all right. So generally symptoms of depression, right? It's really hard to sometimes know what is regular teenage behavior, mood dysregulation, and when should we really start to get concerned, right? And so these are a list of some possible symptoms of depression. Doesn't mean if someone who has a depressive episode is going to have all of them, right? But some things to kind of keep an eye out for. So, starting on the emotional changes, right? An increase in sadness. You might notice increased crying spells, long periods of sadness. Anxiety can manifest in lots of different ways. Maybe it's excessive worrying. Maybe it is, sometimes people have physical symptoms of panic, right? Shaking, like the heart, panic attacks, heart starts to beat really fast. Sometimes there's phobias and fears that come up, right? Social anxiety. Feelings of hopeless, helpless, or worthlessness. There's a couple that I starred here because these are also symptoms, not just for depression, but also can start to raise red flags about some suicidal thoughts and things. Doesn't mean it's automatic, but those are always the things we pay extra special attention to. So the feelings of hopelessness are aligned with, it's never going to get better, right? It's a really dark place to be. Helplessness is there's nothing I can do to make it better, right? Like I'm stuck with this, right? And then worthlessness, we know what that is. Sometimes people feel like I feel really bad, things aren't going well, I deserve it. I don't deserve to be happy, and that sort of thing. So we pay attention to those statements and those thoughts a lot. Sometimes people might become easily irritated or angered. We tend to call that the mad sad. Sometimes the classic symptoms of depression, the sadness, the tearfulness, is not what we see from our kids. We see more anger. They maybe don't have the skills or the comfort to express sadness. And sometimes anger feels a bit more empowering. And so sometimes that's the way it does come out. Be on the lookout for exaggerated self-blame or self-criticism. And so we all have a little bit of that, right? But the exaggerated part is where we might have a kid who is, really only sees the negative, right? They are so hard on themselves to the point that they can't even see any of their positives. Loss of interest in pleasurable activities. So whether that's a sport or a team, hanging out with friends, could be like individual hobbies like reading or music or whatever that they've been into. It's a sign of depression is that those things just stop kind of doing it for us anymore. And so if it doesn't feel good, usually we stop doing them. Low self-esteem. Our self-esteem affects everything, right? And you may be wondering as we're coming through these, like a lot of these are kind of a lot of my teenagers have these kind of symptoms. And we'll talk more about how do you tell besides regular or like your average teenage mood and like depressive symptoms here in a couple slides. But the low self-esteem is an extreme version, right? Difficulties thinking, concentrating with memory. When we are going through a depressive episode, it's really, really hard to focus. It's hard to remember. It's very hard to learn. Extreme sensitivity to rejection or failure. This might be overreacting to like a look or a sigh, a fear of failure or rejection, which again, we all have some of these fears on some level, like that's understandable, but these are the extreme sense of, becoming tearful, expressing strong emotions, like fear of losing friends, family members, those sorts of things. And then another kind of starred ones are any sort of thoughts or comments about death or dying or suicide is a major red flag for us, right? And so those are the emotional things. And sometimes those are, we see those, but some of the behavioral changes that go along with that, I always like to add in, because sometimes we see behaviors versus emotions in kids because they can be pretty good at hiding it, putting on kind of a front that's everything's okay. So some of the behaviors that might be altered are sleep disturbance, right? Whether that is excessive sleeping, like they're sleeping a lot during the day, staying up at night, decreased sleeping is, maybe they're with the anxiety, a lot on their minds. Sometimes it vacillates back and forth, right? Kids might go for a long time without sleeping much and then kind of crash, right? Both are unhealthy, right? Ideally we have a healthy sleep cycle, but that is definitely something to be on the lookout for. Changes in appetite as well. Again, this one can vacillate. Sometimes we will increase eating when we're depressed because it's like emotional, it's soothing, right? It feels good in the moment. And other times we just completely lose our appetite. So, and again, it can go back and forth. Tiredness and loss of energy. Sometimes that's related to lack of sleep or inconsistent sleep. And sometimes that's just a general, lack of energy, right? Because they're feeling so low. Agitation and restlessness, difficulty sitting still more than their average, right? Some kids have a hard time sitting still, but this is maybe a new behavior or increased behavior. Again, being just kind of generally on edge. And sometimes that presents again as anger or anxiety. Anger and anxiety are pretty close cousins in the physical response. Maybe there's frequent complaints of physical symptoms. Sometimes our kids, especially younger kids, but sometimes the older ones, they will complain a lot about body aches or stomach aches or headaches. And that oftentimes they may have, we always rule out physical things, right? We want to keep on top of that. But lots of times our physical well-being and health are influenced by our mood, and we don't always realize that. We have isolative behavior, right? And again, this is one, there is some of this behavior with your average teenage person, but isolated behavior is it goes to the extreme, right? And that they isolate not just from family members, maybe from friends, they kind of shut down, even when they're around, maybe they're there, but not really there. Poor school performance, of course, maybe grades drop. Maybe they're getting in more trouble at school, they're skipping school, or they're having more troubles with teachers or peers. Sometimes there's less attention to hygiene, right? Maybe the showers aren't happening. Someone who used to take really pride in their personal appearance, kind of pick out outfits, makeup, or what have you, they don't do that so much more. It's not quite so important to them. Angry outbursts, again, the behavior. Sometimes the depression with the mad sides comes out in verbal or physical aggression, defiance, no longer wanting to follow rules, meet basic expectations. Risky behavior involves, maybe sneaking out, maybe changing friend group, making impulsive behavior, not really thinking or caring about the outcome or the consequences. Any use of alcohol and drugs is usually a red flag. And self-harm, of course, is a red flag for there might be something going on as far as depression. So those are lots of symptoms we see. So some of the contributing factors, right? Where does this stuff come from, right? It's hard enough to be a teenager, but sometimes the things that also are added in for our kids is brain chemistry, right? We all have like neurotransmitters, right? We have chemicals in our system that travel through our body and affects our mood. And sometimes we have an imbalance with that. Sometimes you'll see that we have medications, you hear about serotonin, dopamine, those sorts of things. So if we have a chemical imbalance or we're not getting those aren't moving through our system, it can trigger depression, right? Hormones, obviously teenagers have an imbalance of hormones and they're changing, but that can trigger definitely mood swings in your average situation, but even more significant depressive episodes. Inherited traits, part of that is genetics, right? So if we have a blood relative, like a parent or a grandparent who has a history of depression, anxiety, that makes it not an absolute, of course, but it makes it more likely that we may also experience some, tendency towards depression and anxiety. Any early childhood trauma, right? So these are, these can be to the extreme of abusive situations. It also could be divorce. It could be the loss of a parent, whether they're not consistently in their world or they pass away. And those things change our brains, right? Trauma, we can recover. There's things that we can do to heal that and work on that. But when we experience traumatic events, whether we're in childhood or as adults, by the way, it does change our brain. Environmental factors, again, sometimes we have frequent moves. Like these are life events. Doesn't again mean that automatically I experience one of these things, I'm going to have a depressive episode, but it can influence it. It's moving is pretty hard for kids, especially if there's multiple moves. Sometimes that's a reality, but that it is hard starting over at new school and such. Learned patterns of negative thinking. So sometimes teen depression can be learned, is linked to a feeling of helplessness, right? Remember, that was one of our symptoms of depression. And so the negative thinking pattern is either self-critical, they're constantly putting themselves down, right? Because they're very hard on themselves. We can be our own harshest critic. Other negative thinking patterns is that hopelessness, there's nothing I can do, right? Everything kind of happens to me. They don't realize that they have some personal power to affect their own mood, their situation, their relationship. And then lack of skills. Maybe they just haven't learned how to handle some of these situations, whether it's social situations, intense emotions. As we grow and develop and we hit puberty, we develop to a point where we start to experience emotions in a much more significant, deep way. And so part of growing up for all of us is learning how to handle those emotions in a healthy way. And most of us don't do always the greatest job at it. There's a learning curve. Right? All right. So depression versus teenage behavior, right? So ultimately, we are looking at a change from a kid's previous attitude and behavior that causes significant distress and problems at school, home, relationships, or other areas. So this is a change. So they may have a few things going on because they're a teenager, but if there's a change, a pretty significant one from how they were functioning before, red flag. Also, to be considered a depressive episode as a therapist, what we're looking for is it causes significant disruption, right, in the school environment, which we kind of talked about. Grades drop, peer issues, maybe relationships. There's increased conflict with friends, loved ones, family. Maybe they're old enough to work, they're calling in, they're not doing the things that they used to do. Also, a depressive episode will have multiple symptoms, most days for 2 or more weeks, right? They're not that they have all the symptoms consistently, right? People who are struggling with depression can have moments of enjoyment or the moments where they're a little bit, higher up in their mood. But if over a span of 2 weeks, that's kind of the mark of most days feeling pretty low with multiple symptoms. One of the things to check in with, because there are times in our lives and definitely our teenagers' lives where they will have stressful situations. Some of those things will come up for finals, for example. That's a natural time where anxiety comes up, irritability, sleep cycle, all those things can get affected. And so a big difference for those who can handle it. Well, that's not fair. The difference for somebody who that is something they struggle with and then they recover somewhat quickly, and somebody who might then that be a trigger into depression, is resilience, right? And so that's the ability to manage challenging feelings. And as a parent or caregiver, kind of checking in with kids and being like, okay, how's it going? What are you doing to get through it? If they can identify, yeah, it's super tough. But I'm gonna, I still have self-care, I'm gonna get through this week, and then I'm gonna relax and hang out with my friends, or catch up on some sleep this weekend. If they have a plan and maybe they need some assistance in knowing how to handle it, that's a good entry place. Versus a kid is this is awful, it's never gonna get better. That's much more concerning. And at any time with any of these things, right? Because I always encourage people to err on the side of caution, right? If you have any concerns for safety for your kids, ask somebody, seek some help, right? There's a lot of people who are willing and open to do assessments. Definitely there's school counselors, your family doctor, therapists, Valley Vista where I work, we have our free assessments for people to kind of let you know what our recommendation is. Even trusted family members, friends, extended relatives, someone in your faith community, right? Sometimes your teenagers will not be willing or open to talking with their parents. Not that you're not great supports, but there's a lot of fear of disappointing you and failure and all those sorts of things, that sometimes for them it is easier to talk to somebody who's not the person that consequences them, and is also responsible for all the tough stuff about parenting. It does look like, Sarah, you have a chart in here that Center Grove uses. Do you want to explain that for?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a chart we have here at Center Grove. It is on our website, so you can find it there pretty easily, but we will also share these slides tomorrow too. So you'll get that in that way as well. But basically it says is I need child for my help, or I need child for my help. I need help for my child. And we kind of split that into two parts to help figure out who at the school is going to be most supportive for you. So academics and mental health. So if it's academics, it goes down that lane. And then you'll seek out help for your child at the school counseling or the school counselor. And then mental health, we ask a couple more questions, such as if they're have harmed themselves, have threatened to harm themselves, if we're concerned for safety. If that's the case, we want you to use those resources we have there and get immediate assistance. But if that's not the case, you can reach out. Every school in Center Grove has a social worker or school counselor in it, so or both. So we encourage you to reach out to whoever you need and who's most appropriate for your kiddo.
All right, awesome. And I saw there are a couple of things at the bottom too of, the 211. And I believe in Sarah will be emailing everyone who attends kind of some resources for me as well. There are some kind of helplines and things that for you or the kids, always, for emergency basis, or just to reach out for some information. So great. All right, so the next slide. So these are things to look out for, right? But I also wanted to provide you guys with some information on, you're obviously here and wanting to learn information of how to support your kids. These are what I add in, building blocks for our mood. These are the things that can help us have the protective factors, right? We have stressors, we have triggers, we have all those sort of things, but these are some of the things that help us stay healthy and be able to manage our mood and our emotions in a healthy way. So the first one, of course, is stay social, right? If you're having healthy friends, pro-social activities, whether it's family, sports, clubs, groups, sometimes jobs are social activities for kids too. But when one of the symptoms, if you remember, was isolation, right? When we shut down and we get very lost in our thoughts, and usually that can be a pretty dark place when we're struggling. So staying social distracts us from our own thoughts, reminds us that we're not alone, and has connections with other people who can also maybe give us some feedback and or just be there for us. Staying active, right? Exercising is part of this, right? Exercise is a great coping skill, but also when we exercise and move our bodies, we release some of those feel-good chemicals, but we're less stressed. We let go of some of that stuff. Going outside, right? Fresh air is pretty important. And being active doesn't necessarily just mean exercise. It also means kind of being productive. So if we stay active in some of our hobbies or interests, that is also being active. When anytime we do something active or productive, we get release of those feel-good chemicals, right? Short-term goals as well. When we set a realistic goal, and that's something that I do a lot with the clients that I work with, and probably myself, is when we set a goal, it helps motivate us, but it feels good, right? And if we check something off our list, or even that we accomplished something, is staying active and productive. Another building block is healthy eating. Tough thing to do sometimes with teenagers, right? But one kind of consistent meals, 2-3 meals a day are the ideal, right? But at least 2 is what we would definitely encourage. Making sure they have some healthy proteins, staying hydrated. A lot of school-aged kids, get dehydrated if they drink a lot of soda and so forth. And minimizing, having some other options besides than just kind of the fast food and the ramen noodles and pizza rolls, even though those might be delicious, having a little bit of a balance is helpful. Healthy eating, or healthy sleeping rather. Again, that's a tall order for teenagers because they can always be all over the place, but the, 8 to 10 hours for ages 13 to 18, right? And this isn't just my number. This is by the American Academy of Pediatrics, right? They also kind of throw in it and put it on there, is for ages 6 to 12, The recommended sleep is 9 to 12 hours. So if you have some, kids that are in the younger, middle school, maybe more towards 12, really they're just getting into this 8 to 10 hour range. And healthy sleep is when we recuperate, right? When our physical body is able to rest and heal, but also our emotions and our mind is able to heal and kind of take a break. And sometimes, healthy sleep is one of those things that sometimes easier said than done, right? Not just with teenagers being busy, but sometimes if we have some anxiety, we have thoughts on our minds, it's hard to fall asleep. So that is, kind of doing the best we can. And letting it out, right? Having some way that we can express, let out our thoughts and feelings, right? Otherwise, they build up and kind of build. We can maintain for a while, but then eventually we explode. We take it out on other people, and that's some of the anger, aggression, defiance, and so forth. Or we implode. We take it out on ourselves, and that's more the isolation, maybe self-harm at the extreme, not taking poor hygiene, all those sorts of things where we shut down. And so sometimes kids, they are so focused on doing well and not disappointing, that fear of failure. It's hard for them to admit they need to let it out, right? And so sometimes we can really encourage them. Some people like to talk, right? Some people like to write, like to journal or write stories. Artistic expression is great. Any and all of the above I can get behind. Resilience, I mentioned earlier, right? And that's the ability to recover from or adapt to challenging life experiences, right? This is something that's really important for any of us to work on and have as a skill. Because when you're younger, there's so many things outside of your control, but if you can learn, it might get tough. I may need to ask for help, and that's okay, but I know I'll figure out a way to get through this and come out the other side and recover. That's a tremendous thing that helps us manage life stressors, and even when we are experiencing like any sort of depressive episode. Also, resilience can help with self-esteem, which is the next one, right? As I say, self-esteem affects everything. It really does. It affects how we view ourselves and the choices we make, how we manage, difficult situations, how we enter into and maintain relationships. So doing our best to support and encourage healthy self-esteem is always a helpful sort of thing. All right. So another slide for Sarah.
Yeah. So I went ahead and just threw some Center Grove student supports on here. Like I said earlier, every building has a social worker or a school counselor or both. And those team members are in each building really to provide brief crisis response. So if you have a kiddo who's ever experiencing any kind of depressive symptom, but specifically any kind of suicidal or homicidal ideation, they are there to provide that brief response, and they provide a referral out to whatever is most appropriate, whether that be recommendation for a further evaluation, or we have community health network providers in our schools that we can refer to for therapy. We might refer to Bella Vista for some other things. So they will provide that list of resources for you to get your kiddo into some other services. So yeah, and I went ahead and I put my name and title and number here. So if anyone ever has trouble figuring out who that is for your school, you're welcome to give me a call. I would be more than happy to help you out, but those are all listed on the website. So if you go to your the Center Grove District website, those can be easily found there, or on each school's website as well. They're pretty accessible. So
All right, excellent.
I think next, Susan, is that our questions we wanted to do?
Yeah, before we go into the bullying kind of information, I wanted to kind of pause and see if there were any questions. I think there's a Q&A option at the bottom. Or
anyone please throw up a question in the Q&A. We did get one a few minutes ago, but it not related to depression. We just asked for us to speak a little slower. So
excellent. I can do that.
Yeah. Let's give it another minute or two to see if someone pops a question in. Need to play some Jeopardy music.
Well, and to be fair, if you have a question about depression and you wait till after the bullying information, we'll still probably answer that, if it comes up later.
Yeah.
Just wanted to not be too overwhelming with information. Right. Well, I think, and with this, if you have one, I think it's okay, Sarah, to type in, and it'll kind of be waiting for us when when I pause.
Yep.
So as I'm speaking, if you think of something, feel free to throw something up there, and I will check in with them after the next several slides. So,
That's
okay.
great.
All right. So bullying, right? So this is definitely a difficult subject and experience that a lot of our kids have to deal with. And it's definitely was one of the things that we wanted to bring to our parent education meetings, because I think it can also be a lot of misunderstandings and miscommunications about it. So the first thing I want to kind of identify what is considered bullying, right? There is an actual definition that kind of puts it into a category separate from rude behavior. Not that we like rude behavior, but rude behavior is something that our kids will experience, right? We don't encourage it, we don't like it. But bullying, if it's bullying, it has three components, right? So the first one is intent, right? Someone is doing something to purposely cause pain or harm, whether that's emotional or physical harm, right? It's not like I'm frustrated and I lashed, I kind of exploded, this one time. Is someone, I mean, purposely trying to hurt you or your kid. Repetition, right? It's not like a once or twice. It's something that continues to happen. It occurs repeatedly, or it's a persistent cruelty. And then the third component is position of power, right? So this is someone's bigger than me, someone is stronger than me, maybe older than me, or of a higher social status, right? Someone who's more popular. That is considered a higher position of power. Right, technically they don't have, power like a teacher, but in social circles and social experiences, they do. Right? So it's really important to, for us when we're talking about bullying, something we definitely want to address, and we want to address rude behavior as well. But I think sometimes it's hard to, really our kids, and kind of the next slide is kind of like that prevention. I think it's really important to educate our kids. What is the difference of what is bullying exactly? Please come talk to me about any of these concerns. And if you're struggling with somebody, we want to help and support you with that. But sometimes working with teenagers the last many years is sometimes things get labeled as bullying, which, and then kind of it takes a life of its own. And for kids, they feel that anytime, some kids feel that anytime somebody is rude to them or says an unkind word, that constitutes bullying. And so that's, again, so that educating kids about that, what constitutes, what doesn't. And then obviously we would definitely want to have an open conversation about it, right? Because whether it's rude behavior or bullying, it has an emotional impact. We want to help our kids, have some strategies. How do we handle that when that happens, whether it's rude behavior or bullying? Who can we go to? What can our response be? If we have an open conversation about it, hopefully they'll be more likely to let us know. Helping your child be a positive role model, right? Helping them understand if you see somebody else being bullied or mistreated, what can you do? That would be safe and helpful. It's a lot of dynamics in our kids face in schools and even in social situations outside of schools. And so, giving and basically empowering them to have some ideas of what they can do. Helping build your child's self-confidence. I talked about self-esteem affects everything, right? And so if the hurtful words will hurt any of us on some level, but if we already feel pretty crappy about ourselves or we feel low about ourselves, we're much more likely to believe those negative words, right? We take them to heart and then kind of repeat them. It's a kind of dangerous pattern. And so helping kids understand, hey, there are a lot of good things about you, and self-talk and reminding ourselves the good things about ourselves, or that we're loved or we're valued, sometimes is our kryptonite, our armor against some unkind words. And be part of their online experience. And that's a hard thing sometimes, because the kids are kind of learn that stuff faster than the rest of us, or at least me. But being online with them, at least occasionally, a lot of bullying and a lot of negativity happens on social media and various things. And kids don't always tell you about it because it's kind of normalized for them, right? Like people say lots of things, and they just kind of accept that as the norm. All right, so
I think,
responding. Oh, go ahead.
sorry. I think too, just adding in here that it kind of goes back to the educating your child about bullying, but also the online experience is if your kiddo has a friend that's bullying them, maybe not so much a great friend. So I think educating your kiddos on what is a good friend, and what is a good friend online and offline. And then if that person or that friend is bullying, then maybe it's a good idea to take a break or step back from that friendship.
Yeah, no, that's great, Sarah, because I think sometimes what happens too, our kids grow up together, and then when they hit that middle school kind of age, it's really hard. And some kids, you know, you know, they handle that, they're unsure, and so they try to fit in, and they start to not be healthy friends anymore, even though they were for years were such good friends, and the family knows them, and all those sorts of things. And so, whether that is helping your kids understand how to set boundaries, and be like, hey, that's not okay to treat me that way, please stop. And if they continue, helping them know it's okay to that friendships change, they ebb and flow. And if someone's not willing to treat you with the respect you deserve, then that is, like Sarah said, not a good friend.
Yeah.
We aren't born knowing how to have healthy relationships. So we need all the help we can get. All right. So let's say your child comes to you and tells you that they're being bullied. Obviously, you're going to have an emotional reaction. Who wouldn't? And so the first thing I encourage people to do is listen. Right. As adults and caring adults, sometimes we want to swoop in and jump in immediately and start the problem solving. And problem solving is great, but I think sometimes we overwhelm kids, or we shut them down when what they really need is for us to listen and hear them out. And so what is happening, kind of in your own mind, kind of is this bullying rude behavior, to kind of help determine your approach, asking the kid what's been done. Like, have they talked to somebody about it at school? Have they tried to talk to the kid about it? What are the skills or things they've been trying to do to manage it? It kind of validates that they are part of this problem solving process, and it helps teach them that kind of idea of resilience, so that they have some knowledge, they have some skills. It's just that, hey, we all need a little help sometimes, right? Always discuss walking away, and explaining a bully's true goal is to get a response. One of the first things that we often think of to share with kids is, well, ignore it, right? And while that is effective skill, right, it's also a lot harder than that. And so some kids, if you say, oh, just ignore it, they will just kind of shut down, right? They'll be like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. I have been ignoring it. But they're walking away. Even ignoring, sometimes people interpret that as I have to sit there and continue to hear it and pretend I'm not hearing it. But being able to walk away, move to a different part of the class, take a time out, whatever that is, change the seat if possible, and letting them understand, what is the motivation for this, not to explain that behavior and like it's okay, but sometimes if we can understand that someone's hurtful behavior is coming from their own hurt or their insecurities, it helps us not personalize it quite so much. Encouraging them to be assertive versus aggressive. When we feel attacked, sometimes we want to attack back, and it's understandable. But that, again, is that reaction we're giving. Being assertive is being able to stand up and say, "Hey, that's not okay. Please stop." Or sometimes, depending on the kids, depending on the situation. And this is where it gets challenging, right? Is because you don't want your kid to get in trouble. We want them to be healthy. And all the situations are transitory and different. Some kids have some success with using some humor, right? Again, kind of showing that they're not getting the response they want, the bully isn't. It also helps the kid kind of manage some of that frustration. But being able to set those boundaries and tell people to stop is a really important skill we want kids to have. Practice what to say, whether that's role playing or giving suggestions. Also, again, encouraging them to come up with some ideas, like what would you, sometimes when it's for us, it's hard to think about. And so sometimes I'll ask kids, like, if your best friend came to you with this, what would you tell them to do? Right? What would you tell them to say to the people around them, or even to themselves? Again, that self-talk is something that we can do to help kind of buffer and protect ourselves when people are saying hurtful things. Encourage your child to be with friends when possible if they're having an issue. And obviously, there's other things going into this too, but bullies are less likely to target a kid when they're with other people, right? So if there's walking from class to class, if you have a buddy with you, one also helps us feel better. We feel safer. We feel more secure. We also recognize this, even if someone says something negative to us, like, okay, yeah, I'm not, but I can ignore that because that's them. I have people who value me and like me and see me in the way that I hopefully see myself. And as always, letting adults know, like letting teachers and counselors know, teachers have an incredibly challenging job, right? If you have a classroom with kids and they do their best, but sometimes kids can be really sneaky, right? And do things when the teacher's not watching. And so if the teacher's aware of it, they can be a support and try to keep an eye on things. All right. And the next slide, what if my child is bullying, right? We in the all compassion and the non-judgment. Sometimes when kids struggle, they have low self-esteem. They have some internal hurts that they haven't really worked through. They may take that out on friends, right? So and so some of the ways that we can address that when we become aware of it is communicate, talk to them, try to explore what's going on and motivating that behavior, right? Encouraging and teaching them healthier ways to cope. Hey, if you feel like sometimes it's like a humor thing, right? Like, okay, I'm bullying because I want to fit in. I feel left out. I feel other. What are some other ways to do that aren't hurtful to others? We also sometimes have to take a look at ourselves. Sometimes we have communication styles that can be on the aggressive side. Sometimes we use humor as kind of a weapon, sarcasm, etc. And so we have to make sure that we're being healthy role models for our kids. And if someone is engaging in bullying behavior, cause and effect, encourage them to have a consequence, right? Consequences aren't there to be mean, I tell the kids, to make us think about it next time so we don't continue it, right? To learn something. And opportunities to make amends, right? If someone's doing something harmful to somebody else, we not only want to consequence them, but give them an opportunity to maybe have some healthy interactions, maybe an apology in person or apology letter, maybe a volunteer opportunity, anything like that, that's kind of teaching them empathy and compassion. And even connecting them with others in a healthy way, we definitely want to reinforce. So, all right. So things to remember. All right. So it is super important not to over label, right? Bullying is real. It happens more than any of us would like, but we want our kids to know the difference between what's bullying and what is not. And bullying is not a positive characteristic of our friend. Like Sarah said, if they have a friend that has turned into a bully or is not treating them in the way they deserve to be treated, it's our job to help them understand how to handle that, and also not continuing to stay in a relationship that is potentially abusive in any sort of way or harmful. It's okay to disagree with a friend, right? Sometimes we forget that, especially when we're growing up, because that internal desire to fit in and connect and be accepted as we're trying to figure out who we are as people, sometimes we stay in situations or relationships that aren't healthy, right? We don't want to rock the boat. We fear losing people. We fear being judged or on the outside. And so helping our kids understand it's okay to disagree, right? We also can agree to disagree. That's a wonderful thing, right? It helps us also let go of having to, like, when we try to make somebody agree with us. If your child tells you they're being bullied, again, first listen, convey that you believe them, right? Whether or not it's under the category of like technical bullying or not, helping them feel validated that they came to talk to you, like understanding this is really hard for them and this is scary or hurtful, believing that impact. And sometimes as adults too, we have built skills to handle unkind words. I hope we have. And so some of it might not seem so major to us, but for them and their, I often say in my groups, feelings aren't facts, but man, it feels like it in the moment, right? We want to validate that this is how they're feeling, and we get that and we hear that. It's vital for them to feel heard and understood. And then moving on to problem solving when they are ready. Sometimes that can be like letting them kind of out, asking kind of what's been done. Sometimes even just asking, hey, so are you ready? Like, oh gosh, you're really struggling. Are you open to some feedback or some ideas? Or would you like to kind of explore some options or hear my thoughts? I think asking is a really nice segue because sometimes they might be so overwhelmed. They're like, no, and maybe you come back to it later. Or again, it helps them be part of the solution versus feeling like us adults are lecturing or being dismissive in any way. And this last one is a hard one, but important to kind of remember. We went a little faster, that's okay. But we really do have to, we can't save our kids from every stress in the world, even though we might like to. It's important for them to experience stressors so that we can help them learn how to cope with difficult emotions, situations, relationships. These are the very things that if they learn now with our support, they can become healthy adults and have healthy relationships, be able to manage conflicts, be able to communicate, set boundaries in their personal lives and in the workplace. And so even though I don't wish difficult situations on anybody, but this is the time that they learn how to be healthy adults and how to manage difficult things. All right. So Sarah has some things on the Center Grove policies and resources.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself and it took me longer than it should have. So I have added here a link to, and like I said before, you'll get this PowerPoint tomorrow. So you'll have just the link you can click on. But Center Grove's policy on bullying is located on our website. So you can go look at that anytime. I won't pull it up right now for sake of time and wanting to get to some questions. So, but know that that's always there. It's on page 52, so you don't even have to look through the table of contents. You can just go right to page 52. I've also listed some different resources from the Department of Education. So those are out there as well. But I also want to point out this last point here of how to report bullying. Here at Center Grove, we have a Safe Schools Alert. This allows students to make a report anonymously. So they can, if you click this link, it'll take you to it and they can make that report via that link. But they can also, it'll say the number on there and they can text it or there's an email they can email, whatever they're most comfortable with to make that report. So that's a resource there.
Awesome. All right. So questions. It looks like there were a couple that Christy has addressed. Someone had shared about the bus. Oh my gosh, yes. So we talk about classes and lunchrooms and things like that, but the bus can be a place where things are said, things are happening. And so I think Christy had shared that definitely reach out to the principal or dean, right? Because we take that stuff. Center Grove seems to take that stuff very seriously, and there are cameras to kind of look. And I think it's hard for kids because sometimes they feel powerless, right? I think, for the person who had asked the question, I think that it's great. I mean, your kid is letting you know what's happening, right? They're reaching out to you, which is wonderful. And obviously that, there can be some interventions to help look at that and see what's going on to support. Okay. Right. Any other questions?
All right. You want me to read it to you, Susan? Would that be helpful?
Oh, I think I just found them. So, I was looking at the answer, but I went to the open. I'm good now. Okay. Okay. I'm trying to understand that. So mostly parents can't trust and not listening, how we can encourage and so if your question was about the child teenager and the trust and not listening, if so, all right.
I think we're asking if for a teenager's, I hear the saying a lot, if a teenager is speaking, they're lying or something around those lines. So if we can't trust the teenager and maybe the teenager's not listening, how can they encourage and motivate them to move forward with either reporting or
Gotcha. Okay. Yes.
That's how I took that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when you're like, if you're a parent, you're trying to be a healthy support, and kids out, we all know sometimes kids do not want to take our advice, right? They, whether it's a trust thing or they would, um, you know, they taking that next step is scary for them for a variety of reasons. Sometimes we can invite, if the kid's okay with it, because we want to have their participation and their approval to share their personal information. But is it okay for me to reach out to the school? Maybe there is that support person again in the community, a spiritual leader or a friend of the family, an aunt and uncle, who they might be a little bit more open. Because sometimes kids they have that wall, like, oh, you're a parent, you don't know anything, right? And so and it is hard because parents, sometimes they you do a lot to encourage your kids, but they also, they have some fear that might get in the way of them following through with that. Wait, I feel like there was another one that I lost. Oh,
I think that was it. The other one we have is for the school's alert link.
okay.
If a kid witnessed I'm guessing another student being bullied, but is unsure of what to do, can they report it at this link? And the answer is absolutely. They can definitely report it that way. Or if they want to talk to someone in person, they can just ask for the office. They can speak with a counselor, social worker, whoever they feel most comfortable with. But I think that's definitely appropriate to report via that school alert link.
Nice. Okay.
Great. Any more questions? Trying to think if I can come up with some questions. Oh, here we go. My daughter is now 15, but when she was 8, a kid told her something mean and it's still hurting.
Yeah, it is, because this is what happens, right? We hear these mean things and we take them to heart and we kind of keep repeating them, right? And so I think some suggestions for that one, and I don't know the severity that it's continuing to affect your daughter. Sometimes that is helping them learn some of that self-talk, right? How do we get to like thought process stuff that gets a little complicated. If I have this negative thought, what are 2 thoughts I can fight it off with, right? And learning that by continuing to repeat that thought to ourselves, we are almost become our own bully, right? Also connected with doing things to increase self-esteem, right? Having a focus on doing things that are rewarding, pro-social activities, positive reinforcement. If it's been going on that long, however, it might be time to kind of let her talk to, or maybe it'd be appropriate, again, not knowing all the details, so maybe talk to a counselor or a therapist. Again, sometimes as the parent, you might be giving them some really amazing support and information, but like you're the parent, so they don't like listen necessarily. And so sometimes having a neutral party to kind of listen and give feedback can be helpful.
Yeah, I think definitely reaching out to the supports through the school would be really helpful for this kiddo. Because, like you said, Susan, I mean, maybe we need to see a therapist more long term through insurance, or maybe just meeting with the school social worker for a couple times for a couple weeks to see if we can process through that past experience and see how we can kind of move forward from it. So I would really, really encourage this kiddo to reach out to the school social worker. For whichever school they're at. So yeah, great question. Thanks for sharing. Any other questions? Susan, any like common questions you feel like you get on a regular basis?
I kind of try to put all that into my slides. I think, I just want to reiterate, I think, though, that, this is kind of tough, scary stuff, right? Not only is it difficult for our kids, but when we're trying to support them, it is really complicated. So reaching out for some support and some help, not just for your kids, but for you, right? We're not just born knowing all this stuff. And so having some feedback and some information can be helpful. I also, with going back to like the depression slides, is, if you're not sure, reach out, right? I know at school they have like assessments, like quick things they can do to kind of see kind of where your kid's at. Of course, Valley Vista is there, but we also, it's okay to ask, right? Because and even if you like ask and they're like, yeah, your kids just, they're pretty good, that's okay. Maybe they don't need the counseling. They just needed to kind of like, Sarah said, like have one or two, moments of kind of letting it out and learning some stuff, and they kind of get back on track. Um,
I think, Susan, I think you made a really great point about um, the parents themselves. I think we as parents can blame ourselves a lot of times when our kiddos feel these things. And so I think it's important to also note that, like, if your kiddo is experiencing depression or bullying, know that it's okay that you're like feeling that with them, right? Because we feel what our kids feel. Um,
mhm.
and so getting your self help as well can be helpful. And that's something the school can help with too, where we can't necessarily provide the service to the parent, but we have resources and options. And that kind of leads me into this next question we have about we need resources for parents and helplines. We have those. And so I will definitely get those sent out to everybody who joined us here today.
Absolutely.
Um, so I'll get those all sent out tomorrow, and I'll have some 24/7 hotlines you can call, and some other good resources that can help not just the kiddos, but the parents as well.
Absolutely. I'd like to dovetail on that too, Sarah, that sometimes it's hard as a parent because you work so hard. If your kid is experiencing any of these things, right, it's not a reflection on your parenting per se, right? Like life, things are tough, right? Especially the last 3 years with, with COVID and with, all the world that we've all gone through, and just being an adolescent. So sometimes parents, it's hard to there's a lot of self-blame, right? And so be careful with that, right? If you can be like, there's no perfect parent, of course, but you can be the healthiest parent in the world and your kid could still struggle, right? Just because there's a lot of things in this world that are hard. So,
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we don't have any questions right now, but I'll give one more call out. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts, concerns? I'll take anything. Oh, here we go. I really enjoy these meetings, and I thank both of you. But how can I listen to this again? Is there a link? There is a link. So we're recording right now. It takes about 24 hours for that link to be I don't know the word, I'm not technology, uploaded. So as soon as that's available for everybody, I will get it emailed out to everyone. It saves who attended today, and I'll get it emailed out as well. But if you know other families who were interested but weren't able to make it today, feel free to let them know to give us an email, and we can get that shared with them as well. So we'll share it with whoever wants it. So it will be available probably 24 hours from now, I'd expect it.
and if you missed the one that we did in the fall, that's posted, I think, on Center Grove Parent Resources as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
right.
Absolutely.
Public speaking is not my first job, so have some compassion. But I appreciate the positive feedback because we definitely just want to get information and support out to everybody.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. All right. I'm taking it that might be it.
All right.
Um, so thank you everyone for joining us.
Mhm.
We will, oh, I took the PowerPoint away, but we have another one of these at the end of the year. So April 27th. Is that right, Susan?
Oh my gosh, I don't. I also don't have it in front of me. I think so.
Okay, April 27th, 6:30, and that topic will be a safe summer. So we will have some different information on how to have a safe summer for you and your kiddo, and hopefully some other panelists as well, to get us some information about summertime. So thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone.